The Xindi alien ambassador gasped as the human pulled an ancient Xindi datapad from the folds of his jacket, not comprehending how the humans had their most guarded secrets until this moment. Ambassador Carl Grant stood before the diverse Galactic Council, many of its members chortling at the human's audacity to even present himself there. The Xindi ambassador Linux jeered the loudest, his mandibles clicking together in a grating chirp as he prodded a long black claw in Carl's direction. "What gives you the right, human, to stand amongst your betters? Your species has barely crawled out of its own pitiful solar system. You are nothing to us, an inferior blip, an evolutionary dead end, soon to be forgotten," Linux sneered. Other aliens guffawed and nodded their heads in agreement, their laughter echoing through the grand chamber. But Carl just smirked, his fingers dancing across the surface of his hand-held hollow projector. "Esteemed Council, what I'm about to show you will alter the very trajectory of galactic history. This device, this marvel of human ingenuity and brilliance, is a time machine," Carl said. The council members shifted in their seats, some muttering in disbelief, others outright scoffing. Linux slammed his claws on the podium before him, his eyes narrowed in contempt. "Preposterous. Time travel is impossible, a fantasy, even for the most technologically advanced among us. You dare insult our intelligence with such an outlandish claim?" Linux sputtered. He input a set of coordinates into the device and vanished in a blinding flash of light. The council erupted into chaos, shouting and demanding answers. But as quickly as he had disappeared, Carl reappeared, holding a strange object in his hand. "This, Ambassador Linux, is a Xindi datapad containing your species' most closely guarded secrets. I retrieved it from your own vault 3 cycles ago," Carl said, tossing the pad to the stunned ambassador. As Linux examined the datapad with trembling claws, the color drained from his face. The implications of what the human had just done began to sink in, and a deafening silence fell over the chamber. Carl stood tall, his voice ringing out with authority. "For eons, humanity has been observing your civilizations, learning from you, adapting your technologies, and waiting for the right moment to reveal ourselves. We may seem primitive to your eyes, but our mastery over time itself has allowed us to shape the very fabric of history undetected." He paused, letting his words hang in the air, the power dynamic in the room shifting palpably. The once arrogant aliens now looked upon the human with a mix of fear and awe. "Now, esteemed Council, let me tell you the true story of humanity's role in this galaxy. For centuries we have guided your civilizations from the shadows, steering you away from catastrophe and towards a brighter future. But today, we step out of the shadows and into the light. Today we claim our rightful place among the stars," Carl declared. The humans smiled, knowing that this was just the beginning. With their time-travel technology, humanity would reshape the galaxy, ensuring their survival and dominance for generations to come. The age of human supremacy had begun, and nothing, not even the combined might of all the alien races, could stop them now. Carl's eyes sparkled as he spun his tale, transporting the Galactic Council back to the early days of humanity's time-travel adventures. Our story begins in the year 2147, when Dr. Elias Novak, a brilliant physicist, stumbled upon the secrets of temporal manipulation during a routine experiment. He couldn't believe his own calculations at first, but the numbers didn't lie. He had unlocked the key to traversing the very fabric of time itself. The human ambassador paused for a moment, letting the weight of his words sink in. Dr. Novak, recognizing the immense potential and danger of his discovery, brought it to the attention of the United Earth government. They were skeptical at first, of course. Time travel? It sounded like something out of a science fiction novel, but after extensive testing and verification, they couldn't deny the truth any longer. Carl leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. And so the UEG formed a covert agency, the Temporal Intervention Bureau, or TIB for short. Its mission? To explore and safeguard the timeline, ensuring that humanity's future remained bright and free from existential threats. He straightened up, his gaze sweeping across the council chamber. The TIB's first mission was to observe the rise of the galactic civilizations, to learn from their successes and failures. We witnessed the Sindi's ascension to power, their wars with the Inkari, and the formation of this very council. Linux, the Xindi ambassador, shifted uneasily in his seat. "How do we know you're not just making this up?" he demanded, his mandibles clicking together in agitation. Carl smiled, a knowing glint in his eye. "Because, Ambassador Linux, we have proof. The TIB has been leaving hidden markers throughout history, evidence of our presence." With a flourish, he produced a small glowing orb from his pocket. The council members leaned forward, their eyes widening in recognition. It was a Xindi artifact, one thought lost centuries ago during the tumultuous peace negotiations with the Inkari. "This," Carl said, holding the orb aloft, "was left behind by our agents during those very negotiations. A reminder of our guiding hand, working tirelessly behind the scenes to ensure that peace prevailed." The council chamber erupted in whispers, as the gravity of humanity's revelations sank in. Species that had once viewed themselves as the masters of their own destinies now found themselves questioning everything they thought they knew. Carl raised his hand, calling for silence. "But our role in your history is only the beginning," he said, his voice growing somber. The true purpose of the TIB was to prevent a catastrophe that would have wiped out all life in the galaxy, an event we discovered in our own future, and one that we've been working tirelessly to avert. The council members leaned forward in their seats, their attention rapt. The once arrogant aliens now hung on the humans' every word, desperate to know more about this looming threat and humanity's role in combating it. "Us?" The council chamber fell silent as the weight of Carl's words sunk in. The holographic display of the Zortex Nebula cast an eerie glow across the faces of the assembled delegates, their expressions ranging from fear to skepticism. He gestured to the shimmering schematic of the infiltration drone. "This is our key to success. With its phase-shift engine, the drone can penetrate the Krylax defenses undetected, allowing us to locate and secure the artifact before they even realize we're there." The council members leaned forward, studying the intricate details of the drone. Linux, his mandibles clicking in agitation, spoke up. "And what assurances do we have that this technology of yours will work as promised? The Krylax are not to be underestimated." Carl met the Xindi ambassador's gaze unflinchingly. "We've tested the drone extensively in simulated environments that mimic the conditions within the Zortex Nebula. It has performed flawlessly every time." He paused, letting his words hang in the air before continuing. "But you're right, Ambassador. The real test will be in the field. That's why we need your help." Carl turned to address the rest of the council. "Each of your species has unique knowledge and capabilities that will be essential to the success of this mission. The Inkari's advanced sensor technology can help us navigate the treacherous nebula, while the Zoraxians' expertise in xenobiology may prove invaluable in understanding any defenses the Krylax have developed." He fixed each council member with a penetrating stare. "This is not just a human endeavor. It is a mission that will require the cooperation and dedication of every species represented here today." Linux, his skepticism still evident, leaned back in his chair. "And if we do agree to this plan of yours, what then? What happens after we secure the artifact?" Carl's expression grew somber. "The artifact will be placed in a secure location, under the joint protection of the TIB and the Council. We cannot afford to let it fall into the wrong hands." He paused, his eyes scanning the faces of the assembled delegates. "But retrieving the artifact is only the first step. We must also work to uncover the identity of the Devourer's followers within the Council and root them out before they can do any more damage." The Council erupted into a cacophony of voices, each member expressing their own concerns and objections. Carl raised his hands, calling for silence. "I know this is a lot to take in, and that trust between our species is not easily earned, but the fate of the galaxy hangs in the balance. We must put aside our differences and work together, or risk losing everything we hold dear." He let his words sink in for a moment before continuing. "I propose a vote. Those in favor of joining the TIB in this mission, raise your hands." Slowly, tentatively at first, hands began to rise around the council chamber. Linux, his expression still guarded, was among the last to raise his hand. The human ambassador turned back to the holographic display, enlarging the image of the infiltration drone. Now let's get to work. We have a nebula to infiltrate and an artifact to secure. He began outlining the details of the mission, his voice steady and resolute. The council members listened intently, their earlier skepticism replaced by a growing sense of determination. They knew the road ahead would be fraught with danger and uncertainty, but they also knew that the alternative was far worse. As Carl spoke, the holographic display shifted, showing a simulation of the drone penetrating the Krylax defenses and retrieving the artifact. The council watched in rapt attention, each member silently vowing to do their part in the coming battle for the fate of the galaxy. The human ambassador's voice rang out, filled with conviction. "We will not fail, we cannot fail. The future of every species, every world, depends on our success." And with those words, the council chamber erupted into a flurry of activity, as the representatives of a dozen species began to plan for the most important mission of their lives. The council chamber buzzed with a mix of anticipation and trepidation as the members deliberated on the TIB's proposal. Whispered conversations filled the room, each species weighing the risks and potential rewards of collaborating with the enigmatic humans. After what seemed like an eternity, the council reached a consensus. Linux, his mandibles twitching, addressed Carl. "The council has agreed to your terms, human. We will work together to secure the artifact and thwart the Devourer's followers." Carl nodded, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Excellent. We'll begin preparations immediately. Our first step will be to assemble a team of specialists, each chosen for their unique skills and knowledge." He tapped on the holographic display, bringing up a roster of names and faces. The images shimmered in the air, each one representing the best and brightest from their respective species. "From the TIB we have Agent Zephyr, our top infiltration expert," Carl said, gesturing to the image of a lithe, dark-haired human with piercing blue eyes. "She's trained in advanced stealth techniques and has a knack for getting in and out of tight situations undetected." Next to Zephyr's image, another face appeared, this one belonging to a middle-aged woman with short, graying hair and a determined expression. "And this is Dr. Lena Sorkin, our leading authority on xenotechnology. Her expertise will be invaluable in understanding and adapting to any unfamiliar tech we may encounter." Carl turned to face Linux, his expression serious. "Ambassador Linux, we'll need your best scout, someone familiar with the Zortex Nebula." The Xindi ambassador hesitated for a moment before responding, his claws tapping against the arm of his chair. "I'll assign Captain Xerox. He's our most experienced navigator and has a keen eye for detail." Carl added the captain's profile to the roster, the Xindi's image appearing alongside the others. "Perfect." He scanned the faces of the other council members, his gaze settling on the Vy'keen delegation. "We'll also need a representative from the Vy'keen, someone with advanced engineering skills to help integrate our technologies." A tall, slender alien with an elongated head stood up from his seat, his robes shimmering in the chamber's light. "I am Kortal, Chief Engineer of the Vy'keen Fleet. I volunteer my services." Carl grinned, his eyes sparkling with approval. "Welcome aboard, Kortal. With this team, we stand a chance of infiltrating the Krylax defenses and securing the artifact." The newly formed team gathered around the holographic display, their faces illuminated by the glowing schematics of the infiltration drone and the swirling gases of the Zortex Nebula. Carl's voice rang out as he briefed them on the mission parameters. "We'll have one shot at this," he said, his finger tracing the drone's projected path through the nebula. "The drone will be deployed from a cloaked ship at the edge of the nebula. It will navigate through the gas clouds, avoiding the Krylax sensor arrays until it reaches the planet's surface." The team members nodded, their eyes fixed on the display as Carl continued. "Once there, it will phase through the vault walls and retrieve the artifact. We'll have a limited window to extract the drone before the Krylax detect the intrusion. Cortal leaned forward, his long fingers manipulating the hologram to zoom in on the drone's phase shift engine. Impressive technology, he mused, his voice tinged with admiration, but integrating it with our systems will be a challenge. Dr. Sorkin stepped up beside him, her eyes gleaming with the thrill of a new puzzle to solve. A challenge we're more than capable of overcoming, she said, her hand resting on Cortal's shoulder. Together, we'll make sure this mission succeeds. As the team delved into the technical details of the operation, Carl stood back, watching as the greatest minds in the galaxy worked to unravel the secrets of the Krylax and the Vortex Nebula. For the first time since the discovery of the Devourer, he allowed himself to feel a glimmer of hope. But even as the plan took shape, Carl couldn't shake the feeling that they were racing against an unseen clock. Somewhere out there, the Devourer's followers were working to assemble the artifacts and unleash their master upon the galaxy. They had to move fast, or all would be lost. Agent Zephyr's voice cut through his thoughts, her tone sharp and focused. "I'll need detailed scans of the Krylax vault," she said, her eyes locked on the holographic display. "Every sensor array, every security measure. We can't afford any surprises once we're inside." Captain Xerox nodded, his clawed fingers dancing across the console as he brought up the latest intelligence reports. "I've charted the safest path through the nebula," he said, the display shifting to show a winding route that threaded between the densest pockets of gas and radiation. "But even then, we'll need to be constantly on alert. The Krylax are not known for their hospitality." As the team continued to plan and strategize, Carl felt a weight settling on his shoulders. The fate of the galaxy rested on their success, and failure was not an option. They had to retrieve the artifact and uncover the identity of the Devourer's followers within the Council. Only then could they hope to stop the ancient entity from consuming everything in its path. Carl stepped forward, his voice cutting through the chatter. "We have our work cut out for us," he said, his gaze sweeping across the faces of the team. "But I have faith in each and every one of you. Together, we will succeed." The team members nodded, their expressions a mix of determination and resolve. They knew the stakes and they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the briefing drew to a close, Carl couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. In the face of an existential threat, the species of the galaxy had put aside their differences and united behind a common cause. It was a moment that would be remembered for generations to come. But even as he savored the victory, Carl knew that the real work was just beginning. The infiltration of the Vortex Nebula would test the limits of their courage and ingenuity, and the true nature of the Devourer's followers within the Council remained a mystery. But for now they had a plan and a purpose, and with the combined strength of the TIB and the Galactic Council behind them, they would face the darkness head-on, no matter the cost. The council chamber buzzed with frantic energy as Carl's team raced against the clock. Cortal and Dr. Sorkin hunched over the infiltration drone, their fingers flying across the sleek surface as they worked to integrate the phase shift engine. Sparks flew as Cortal soldered delicate circuitry, his brow furrowed in concentration. "The power couplings need to be recalibrated," Dr. Sorkin said, her eyes locked on the holographic schematic floating above the drone. "We can't risk a malfunction during the mission." Cortal nodded, his long fingers making precise adjustments. "I've boosted the output of the phase emitters. The drone should be able to penetrate the Krylax defenses with ease." Across the room, Captain Xerox and Agent Zephyr pored over a detailed map of the Vortex Nebula, the swirling gases casting an eerie glow across their faces. Xerox traced a winding path through the nebula, his clawed finger hovering over the densest pockets of gas. "We'll need to avoid these regions," he said, his voice low and urgent. "The radiation levels are too high even for the drone." Agent Zephyr leaned in closer, her eyes narrowed. "What about this corridor?" she asked, pointing to a narrow gap between two swirling vortexes. "It's risky, but it could shave hours off our approach." Xerox hesitated, weighing the options. "It's possible," he conceded, "but we'll need to be precise. One wrong move and we could be pulled into the heart of the nebula." As the team worked feverishly, Carl stood at the center of the chamber, his eyes locked on the encrypted message flickering on his holoscreen. The words Devourer's Cult and Intercept stood out in stark relief, a chilling reminder of the stakes they faced. Carl's mind raced as he coordinated with TIB headquarters, his fingers flying across the holoscreen as he relayed updates and contingency plans. He knew that every second counted, that the cult's operatives could already be en route to the Vortex Nebula. As the final minutes ticked away, the team assembled in the hangar bay, their faces grim with determination. The sleek, black ship loomed before them, its engines humming with barely contained power. Carl stood before the group, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "I won't lie to you," he said, his gaze sweeping across the assembled faces. "This mission is risky. We're not just racing against time, but against an enemy that will stop at nothing to see the galaxy burn." The team boarded the ship, each member taking their station with practiced efficiency. The engines roared to life, the deck vibrating beneath their feet as the ship prepared for launch. Carl settled into the command chair, his fingers flying across the console as he initiated the launch sequence. The hangar doors slid open, revealing the vast expanse of space beyond. Carl took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest. "All right, let's do this," he said, his voice cutting through the hum of the engines. "Engage cloaking device and set course for the Vortex Nebula. We have an artifact to secure and a galaxy to save." The ship shimmered and vanished as the cloaking device engaged, the stars beyond the viewport blurring into streaks of light as they accelerated towards their destination. The team exchanged glances, each one aware of the danger they faced, but united in their resolve. They were the galaxy's last hope, a band of unlikely allies brought together by fate and circumstance, and as they hurtled through the void, racing against time and an implacable foe, they knew that failure was not an option. The Vortex Nebula awaited them, a swirling mass of gas and mystery that held the key to the galaxy's salvation, and somewhere within its depths the artifact lay waiting, a prize that could tip the balance of power in the war against the Devourer. Carl's eyes narrowed as he stared out at the stars, his mind already racing ahead to the challenges that lay before them. They had to succeed, no matter the cost. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, and he would not let it fall. The ship sliced through the void like a blade, its cloaking device concealing it from all eyes as it raced towards the Vortex Nebula. Inside, the team worked feverishly to prepare for the deployment of the infiltration drone. Dr. Sorkin and Kortal hunched over the drone's open access panel, their fingers flying across the circuitry as they made final calibrations to the phase shift engine. "Kortal, set the phase variance to 2035 on my mark," Dr. Sorkin said tersely. Kortal nodded, his eyes locked on the display. "Variance set. Ready on your mark, Doctor." In the pilot's seat, Agent Zephyr gripped the controls, guiding the ship ever closer to the swirling chaos of the nebula. Her jaw tightened as the first tendrils of gas brushed against the view screen, the colors shifting hypnotically. She input the coordinates for the planet's surface, plotting a course that would take the drone through the least dense pockets of interference. Just as the drone detached from the ship's undercarriage and dove into the nebula's outer edge, the sensors screamed a warning. Captain Xerox leaned over the readout, his face grim. "We've got company. A Krylax patrol ship bearing down on our position. They must have detected our energy signature." Carl pounded his fist against the arm of his chair, cursing under his breath. The cloaking device had been compromised. He spun to face Agent Zephyr, his voice urgent. "Get that drone planet-side now. We'll buy you as much time as we can." The ship bucked as the first volley of Krylax fire slammed into the shields, the advanced alien weapons tearing through the protective barrier like it was paper. Carl and Captain Xerox worked in tandem, hands flying across the controls as they executed evasive maneuvers and returned fire. The ship wove through the dense gas clouds, using the nebula's natural interference to confuse the Krylax's sensors. On the view screen, Agent Zephyr watched as the drone plunged through the planet's atmosphere, its phase shift engine glowing bright as it phased through the layers of defense batteries and anti-air cannons. The vault's location glowed on her display, a pulsing beacon guiding the drone to its target. With a final burst of speed, the drone phased through the vault's walls, its sensors immediately locking onto the artifact's unique energy signature. Agent Zephyr held her breath as the drone's grasping appendages extended, carefully maneuvering the artifact into the containment field. Just as the field snapped into place around the artifact, the ship's hull breached with a scream of tortured metal. Alarms blared as the life support systems failed, the acrid scent of smoke filling the air. Carl shouted over the chaos, "Zephyr, status report!" Agent Zephyr's voice crackled over the comms, barely audible over the background destruction. "I have the artifact, but the drone is taking heavy fire. I don't know if it'll make it back to the ship." Carl made a split-second decision, his mind racing through the possibilities. "Abort the retrieval. We'll drop out of cloak long enough for you to teleport the artifact directly to the ship. On my mark." The team braced for impact, strapping themselves into their seats as they prepared for the inevitable. They all knew the risks of dropping the cloak, even for a moment. The Krylax would have a clear shot at the ship, and the team would be defenseless. Carl counted down, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through his veins. 3, 2, 1, mark! The ship shuddered as the teleportation field engaged, the very fabric of space warping around them. For a moment everything seemed to pause, the chaos of battle fading away as the artifact materialized on the bridge in a blinding burst of light. And then the moment shattered, as the Krylax's weapons found their mark. The ship's engines exploded, the force of the blast sending the ship careening towards the planet's surface. Carl fought with the controls, desperately trying to regain control, but it was too late. The ship plummeted through the atmosphere, the heat of re-entry turning the hull into a blazing inferno. The team held on for dear life, their eyes locked on the rapidly approaching ground. They braced for impact, knowing that this could be the end of everything they'd fought for. Carl's eyes snapped open, his head throbbing as he took in his surroundings. The acrid scent of burnt metal and scorched earth filled his nostrils, and he coughed, wincing at the sharp pain in his ribs. Around him, the wreckage of the ship lay scattered, twisted metal and sparking wires jutting out at odd angles. He heard a groan nearby and turned to see Dr. Sorkin pushing herself up from the ground, her face streaked with soot and blood. "Is everyone all right?" she called out, her voice hoarse. One by one, the team members responded, each nursing their own injuries but miraculously alive. Captain Xerox limped over to Carl, his uniform torn and his scales scraped raw. "That was some damn fine piloting," he said, clasping Carl's shoulder. "If you hadn't steered us towards that soft patch of ground, we'd all be space dust." Carl nodded, grateful for the captain's quick thinking. But as he surveyed the damage to the ship, his heart sank. The engines were completely destroyed, the hull breached in a dozen places. There was no way they were getting off this planet without help. And then there was the artifact. Dr. Sorkin stumbled over to the containment unit, her eyes widening as she saw the pulsing, sickly light emanating from within. "The field is failing," she said, her voice tight with worry. "If we don't find a way to stabilize it soon, the artifact's energy could attract unwanted attention." As if on cue, a rustling sound came from the dense foliage surrounding the crash site. The team members drew their weapons, forming a defensive perimeter around the artifact. Carl's heart raced as he scanned the tree line, expecting to see the gleaming armor of Krylax soldiers at any moment. But instead, a group of primitively dressed aliens emerged from the jungle, their large luminous eyes blinking in the harsh sunlight. They carried no weapons, only simple tools and woven baskets. One of them, an elderly female with intricate markings on her wrinkled skin, stepped forward, speaking in a language none of the team had ever heard before. Carl fumbled with his translator, hoping against hope that it had survived the crash. To his surprise, the device crackled to life, and the alien's words became clear. "Welcome, Skyfarers," she said, her voice soft and melodic. "We have waited long for your arrival." The team members exchanged confused glances, lowering their weapons slightly. "I'm sorry," Carl said, stepping forward. "But who are you, and how do you know about us?" The elderly female smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "I am Shara, elder of the Voxna people, and we have known of your coming for generations, ever since the prophecy was first spoken." She pointed to the artifact, still glowing within its damaged containment unit. "The Shard of Destiny, the key to our salvation. It was foretold that the Skyfarers would bring it to us in our darkest hour, when the great evil threatens to consume all." Carl felt a chill run down his spine. Could this be mere coincidence, or was there something more at work here? He glanced at his team members, seeing the same questions reflected in their eyes. Shara beckoned to them, her movements graceful despite her age. "Come," she said. "There is much to discuss and time grows short. Our village is not far from here, and there you will find the answers you seek." Carl hesitated for a moment, weighing the risks. They were stranded on an unknown planet, their ship destroyed and their artifact dangerously unstable, but something in Shara's eyes, a depth of wisdom and knowing, made him trust her. He turned to his team, his decision made. "We'll go with her," he said. "If there's even a chance that these people can help us understand the artifact and its connection to the Devourer, we have to take it." The others nodded, gathering what supplies they could from the wreckage. Dr. Sorkin carefully lifted the containment unit, cradling it in her arms like a newborn child. Captain Xerox and Agent Zephyr took point, their weapons at the ready, as they followed Shara into the jungle. As they walked, Carl couldn't shake the feeling that their mission had just taken an unexpected turn. The Voxna, the artifact, the prophecy. It all seemed too coincidental to be mere chance. And yet, deep down, he knew that this was meant to be, that the threads of fate were weaving together in ways he couldn't yet comprehend. He glanced up at the alien sky, the stars twinkling through the gaps in the canopy. Somewhere out there the Devourer waited, its followers plotting and scheming. But here, on this primitive world, Carl and his team had found an unlikely ally, one that could hold the key to unraveling the mysteries of the galaxy and securing the future of all sentient life. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger and unknowns. But as Carl looked at the determined faces of his team members and the wise, knowing eyes of Shara, he knew that they would face whatever challenges lay ahead together, united in their quest to stop the Devourer and save the galaxy from annihilation. As the team entered the village, a throng of curious onlookers greeted them, their whispers and excited gestures making it clear that the arrival of the Skyfarers was a momentous event. Children pointed and gasped, while adults murmured to each other in hushed tones. Shara led the group through the winding paths of the village, past huts with thatched roofs and gardens overflowing with exotic plants. They approached a central hut, larger than the others and adorned with intricate carvings that seemed to dance in the flickering light of glowing crystals. As they stepped inside, the team found themselves in the presence of a group of elders seated around an ancient stone table. Upon the table rested a device that bore a striking resemblance to the artifact they carried, its surface etched with similar symbols and emanating a soft, pulsing light. Shara approached the elders, bowing her head in respect. She spoke in their native tongue, her words flowing like a gentle stream. The elders listened intently, their eyes widening as she explained the team's arrival and the significance of the artifact they bore. One of the elders, a tall, slender male with a crown of iridescent feathers, rose from his seat. He introduced himself as Tokrath, the keeper of the ancient knowledge. His voice was deep and resonant, filled with the wisdom of ages past. "The artifact you carry," Tokrath began, his eyes fixed on the damaged containment field, "is known to us as the Shard of Destiny. It is one of 7 pieces of an ancient weapon, the Devourer's Bane, created by a long-forgotten race to combat the very threat you now face." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the team. "According to our legends, the weapon was shattered and scattered across the galaxy, hidden away to prevent it from falling into the wrong hands. Our village has guarded this piece for generations, waiting for the prophesied Skyfarers to arrive and unite the shards once more." Carl and the team exchanged glances, stunned by the revelation. The weight of their mission seemed to grow heavier with each passing moment, the fate of the galaxy resting on their shoulders. They shared their own knowledge of the Devourer and the cult that sought to awaken it, the elders' faces growing grave as they listened. Tokrath nodded, his expression somber. "The Devourer's return is near," he warned, his voice tinged with urgency. "We must act quickly. I will help you stabilize the damaged artifact and share the knowledge needed to locate the remaining shards." As the team worked alongside the villagers, repairing the containment field and poring over ancient texts, a sense of urgency grew. They knew that the cult would stop at nothing to claim the artifact, and that the Krylax would be searching for their crashed ship. Time was running out, and the fate of countless lives hung in the balance. Carl gathered the team around him, his eyes blazing with determination. "We have to find the other shards before the cult does. We'll use the knowledge gained here to track them down, and we'll call upon our allies in the Galactic Council to aid us in our quest." He looked to each member of the team, his voice unwavering. "The Devourer's bane may be our only hope of stopping the Devourer once and for all. We cannot fail." As the sun began to set over the village, casting long shadows across the ground, the team prepared for the journey ahead. They knew that the path would be fraught with danger, that the cult and the Krylax would be hot on their heels, but they also knew that they had no choice. The fate of the galaxy depended on them, and they would not rest until the shards were united and the Devourer was defeated. Carl looked to the horizon, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the battle for the fate of the galaxy had only just begun. As the team prepared to depart the village, Carl couldn't shake the feeling of urgency that gripped his heart. The knowledge imparted by the elders weighed heavily on his mind, the true nature of the artifact and the terrible power it held becoming all too clear. With the stabilized shard in hand, they set out to locate the remaining pieces, knowing that every moment lost brought the cult one step closer to their nefarious goals. The team crisscrossed the galaxy, chasing down leads and battling the cult's agents at every turn. From seedy spaceports to ancient ruins, they followed the trail of clues left behind by the long-forgotten race that had created the Devourer's bane. Each shard they secured brought them closer to their goal, but also painted a target on their backs. Along the way, they forged alliances with unlikely allies. A rogue Krylax commander, disillusioned with his people's secrecy and realizing the true threat of the Devourer, joined their cause. His knowledge of Krylax technology and tactics proved invaluable in their battles against the cult. They also encountered a band of outcast scientists who had been studying the Devourer's origins in secret, their research driven underground by the cult's influence. These brilliant minds provided key insights into the nature of the Devourer and the ancient weapon designed to stop it. Together, this ragtag group managed to secure 5 of the 7 shards, each victory hard-fought and costly, but the final 2 shards proved to be the most challenging yet. The cult, having grown in strength and numbers, launched a massive assault on the Galactic Council, revealing the terrifying depth of their infiltration. In the chaos of the attack, they managed to steal one of the shards, leaving Carl and his team in a desperate race to secure the final piece. The trail led them to a remote, uncharted system, far from the prying eyes of the galaxy. There, hidden among the ruins of an ancient outpost, they discovered the last shard, along with a terrible truth. The outpost belonged to the ancient race that had created the Devourer's bane, and the crumbling walls held the secrets of the weapon's true power. Carl and his team learned that the weapon, once assembled, would indeed destroy the Devourer, but at a terrible cost. The energy released would tear apart the very fabric of space and time, wiping out not just the Devourer, but countless innocent lives across the galaxy. Faced with an impossible choice, Carl and his team wrestled with the weight of their discovery. To use the weapon would be to sacrifice billions to save trillions, a decision that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. But to let the Devourer win was unthinkable. In the end, they chose a third option, one born of desperation and the unshakable belief that there had to be another way. Using the time machine technology that had started it all, They devised a plan to lure the Devourer into a temporal trap, using the assembled Devourer's bane as bait. The final battle was brutal and costly. The cult, realizing their plans were unraveling, unleashed all their forces in a desperate bid to seize the weapon. Carl and his team fought valiantly, each member giving their all to protect the weapon and each other. But in the end, it was Agent Zephyr who made the ultimate sacrifice. With the Devourer bearing down on them and the cult closing in, she volunteered to stay behind, to activate the temporal trap while the others escaped. Carl watched in horror as Zephyr disappeared in a blinding flash of light, the trap snapping shut around the Devourer and the cult. Their screams of rage and despair echoed across the cosmos as they were pulled into a collapsing pocket of space-time, never to be seen again. The galaxy was saved, but the price was high. The team, battered and broken, was left to mourn their fallen comrade and to grapple with the knowledge of how close they had come to total annihilation. In the aftermath of the battle, the Galactic Council, humbled by the revelations of the cult's infiltration and the humans' vital role in saving them all, vowed to work towards greater cooperation and understanding between all species. The sacrifices of Carl's team would not be forgotten, and their legacy would live on in a galaxy forever changed by their actions. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.